She was just a waitress, one face in a sea of many at the royal table. He was Takashi Yamamoto, a billionaire whose empire stretched across continents. A man who could likely buy the entire restaurant, staff and all, with the spare change in his bespoke suit pocket. When he uttered a string of insults in rapid-fire Japanese, assuming she was too dim-witted to understand, he unwittingly set in motion a chain of events that would unravel his carefully constructed world. Little did he know, this unassuming waitress harbored a secret weapon, a command of his native tongue that would dismantle his arrogance in a matter of seconds. This is the story of how one perfectly delivered sentence, spoken in flawless Japanese, turned the world of a powerful man completely upside down. And by the time you reach the end, you'll understand that the quietest individuals in the room are often the ones with the most potent capabilities. Stay with me, because what's coming will leave you breathless. Welcome to Voice of Granny. Before we dive in, why not hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts on the story in the comments? And be sure to let us know where you're watching from. Life sometimes places us in environments where we feel invisible, where we blend into the background, perceived as nothing more than mere fixtures. That was Sarah Williams' reality, day in and day out. At 24, she worked at the Royal Table, a high-end restaurant in the heart of London. It was a haven for the city's elite, a place where a single entree could cost more than Sarah earned in a week. Chandeliers dripped with crystals that sparkled like captured starlight. The plush carpet swallowed your footsteps, and each plate emerging from the kitchen was a meticulously crafted masterpiece. But for Sarah, it was far from glamorous. It was simply survival. Each morning, she'd wake in her cramped East London apartment, the kind where you could hear your neighbors' arguments through the thin walls, and the unreliable heating was a constant source of frustration. She'd don her starched black uniform, pull her dark hair back into a severe bun, and make her way to the underground. 2 train transfers and a grueling 40-minute commute later, she'd arrive at the Royal Table, bracing herself for another shift that would leave her feet throbbing and her spirit weary. What most people didn't suspect about Sarah was that she led a double life. Outside of her waitressing duties, she was a dedicated student at London University, immersed in the study of languages. Not just one or two, mind you. Sarah spoke French with the effortless grace of a Parisian, Spanish with the passionate flair of someone from Madrid, and Mandarin fluently enough to engage in meaningful conversations. But her true talent lay in Japanese. She had spent a transformative year in Tokyo on a prestigious scholarship, living with a warm and welcoming host family, attending one of Japan's top universities, and completely immersing herself in the intricacies of the language and culture. She had fallen head over heels in love with everything about it. The elegant dance between politeness and familiarity in conversation, the nuanced ways people conveyed respect and emotion through subtle linguistic cues. Her entire university thesis was dedicated to it. But none of that mattered within the gilded walls of the Royal Table. There, she was just another anonymous waitress, another pair of hands to serve the pampered clientele who rarely bothered to meet her gaze. Her manager, Mr. Peterson, was a perpetually flustered man, more concerned with currying favor with wealthy patrons than treating his staff with basic decency. He was prone to panic over the smallest infractions, a misplaced fork, an improperly folded napkin, and would invariably take his frustrations out on whoever was within reach. Sarah had learned the art of self-preservation, keeping her head down and avoiding his orbit. Then there was Victoria. Having worked at the restaurant for 6 long years, Victoria acted like she owned the place. Her eyes were like a hawk, missing nothing, and her smile never quite reached their cold depths. From the moment Sarah joined the staff, Victoria had perceived her as a threat. Sarah was younger, quicker, and the customers seemed drawn to her genuine warmth. Victoria couldn't abide it. So, Victoria made Sarah's life a subtle, ongoing hell. She'd assign Sarah the worst tables, the most notoriously difficult customers. She'd conveniently forget to inform Sarah when an order was ready, making her appear slow and incompetent. She'd subtly poison the well, whispering rumors and spreading falsehoods amongst the other staff members. Nothing overt enough for Sarah to formally complain about, but enough to make each shift feel like navigating a treacherous minefield. Sarah endured it all because she had no other choice. The wages from this job were her lifeline, covering her university tuition, her meager rent, her daily meals. She was on the cusp of completing her degree, so tantalizingly close to a brighter future. She just needed to hold on a little longer. On this particular Tuesday evening, however, there was a palpable shift in the atmosphere. Sarah sensed the unusual tension the moment she clocked in. Mr. Peterson was practically vibrating with anxiety, his face an alarming shade of crimson. The other staff members were huddled in hushed conversations, their faces etched with concern. "What's going on?" Sarah asked one of the kitchen staff, a young busboy named Ben. "Haven't you heard?" he whispered, his eyes wide. "Takashi Yamamoto is coming tonight." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Everyone knew that name. Takashi Yamamoto was a titan of the Japanese real estate world, one of the wealthiest men in Asia. He had amassed a vast fortune by buying and developing properties across the globe, from the bustling streets of Tokyo to the glittering skyscrapers of New York and London. He was renowned for 2 things: his unparalleled business acumen and his notoriously volcanic temper. The newspapers adored him, dubbing him the Ice Emperor, for his cold, calculating approach to business and his reputation for ruthlessly crushing anyone who dared to stand in his path. Mr. Peterson summoned all the staff to the kitchen, his hands trembling ever so slightly. "Listen up, everyone," he said, his voice strained. "Mr. Yamamoto has reserved our finest table for this evening. This is the most crucial booking we've had all year. Everything must be absolutely flawless." "Flawless? Do you all understand?" A chorus of nods rippled through the staff. Then, Mr. Peterson's gaze landed on Sarah. "Williams, you will be serving table 7. His table." Sarah felt her stomach plummet. Table 7 was strategically positioned in the very center of the dining room, the most visible spot in the entire restaurant. She caught Victoria's smug expression, her arms crossed triumphantly. This was a calculated setup. Either Sarah would spectacularly fail in front of everyone, providing Victoria with endless ammunition, or she would somehow succeed, and Victoria would find an even more insidious way to make her suffer. "Sir, perhaps someone with more experience," Sarah began, attempting to deflect the inevitable disaster. But Mr. Peterson cut her off sharply. "I've made my decision, Williams. Don't disappoint me." As Sarah straightened her apron and took a deep breath, she had no way of knowing that the coming hours would irrevocably alter the course of her life. That her hidden knowledge, the linguistic skills she had diligently cultivated, would become the key to navigating the most defining moment of her existence. The clock ticked inexorably towards 7 p.m. The storm was approaching. Precisely at 7 p.m., the grand front doors of the royal table swung open, and Takashi Yamamoto entered. The entire restaurant seemed to collectively hold its breath. He was a man in his late 50s, tall and lean, clad in a suit so impeccably tailored it likely cost more than a small car. His dark hair was streaked with distinguished silver at the temples, and his face was set in a permanent expression of cool displeasure, as if everything around him fell slightly short of his exacting standards. But it was his eyes that truly commanded attention. Dark, piercing, like those of a hawk surveying its prey. He was not alone. Two younger men flanked him, both Japanese, both wearing expensive suits that somehow lacked the understated elegance of their boss's attire. They appeared visibly nervous, their shoulders rigid, their smiles forced. These were likely junior executives from his company, Sarah surmised, men who had learned firsthand that proximity to Takashi Yamamoto was both an unparalleled opportunity and a constant test of survival. Mr. Peterson practically sprinted to greet them, bowing with such exaggerated deference that Sarah feared he might topple over. "Mr. Yamamoto, welcome, welcome. What an absolute honor to have you dining with us this evening." Yamamoto's icy gaze swept over the manager as if he were examining an insignificant insect. He offered no handshake, no polite smile. He simply stated in heavily accented English, "My table." It wasn't a question. It was an unquestionable command. Of course. Right this way, sir." Mr. Peterson gestured frantically toward table 7, leading the group across the hushed dining room. Other patrons turned to stare, whispering amongst themselves. Everyone recognized the infamous Ice Emperor. Sarah watched their approach, her heart pounding against her ribs. She had served her fair share of difficult customers before. Temperamental celebrities, demanding politicians, wealthy business moguls who treated service staff as if they were invisible. But this felt different. There was an almost tangible aura surrounding Yamamoto, a palpable coldness that permeated the entire room. As Mr. Peterson seated them, he gestured toward Sarah with a nervous flourish. "And this is Sarah, Mr. Yamamoto. She'll be taking care of you this evening. She's one of our finest servers." Sarah stepped forward, her practiced professional smile plastered on her face. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the royal table." Yamamoto's eyes flicked to her for a fleeting moment. In that brief instant, Sarah felt herself being assessed, categorized, and ultimately dismissed. She might as well have been a piece of furniture. His two associates didn't even acknowledge her presence. She handed them the leather-bound menus, her hands remarkably steady despite the turmoil churning within her. Yamamoto accepted his without a word, without the slightest acknowledgement that she was even a person standing before him. And so it began. From the very outset, Takashi Yamamoto proved to be an impossible customer to please. He scrutinized the wine list with a deep frown, then proceeded to pepper Sarah with highly technical questions about the vintages, questions clearly designed to expose her ignorance. But Sarah had spent 3 years working in restaurants, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. She knew her wines. She answered each question calmly and accurately. She detected a flicker of irritation in his eyes each time she provided the correct answer. He ordered an appetizer, an elaborate arrangement of seared scallops with a delicate citrus sauce. When she delivered it, he took a single bite, then abruptly pushed the plate away. "Overcooked," he declared flatly. "Take it back." Sarah didn't argue. "Of course, sir. I'll speak to the chef immediately." The second appetizer arrived, a different preparation of scallops, even more meticulously crafted. This time, he ate in silence, but his facial expression conveyed his utter lack of satisfaction. His two associates, watching his every micro-reaction, hastened to echo his sentiments. "Yes, not quite right," one of them murmured, nervously dabbing his mouth with a napkin. "Could be better," added the other, avoiding eye contact. As the evening progressed, Yamamoto found fault with everything. The lighting was too bright. The music was irritating. The table was situated too close to the drafty entrance. Each complaint was delivered in that same cold, toneless voice, never raising in volume, which somehow made it all the more unsettling. Sarah handled each issue with unwavering grace, offering sincere apologies, rectifying what could be fixed, and stoically enduring what could not. Across the dining room, Victoria was observing the unfolding drama with barely concealed glee. Every time Sarah had to retreat to the kitchen with another complaint, Victoria would smirk and whisper to the other servers, reveling in Sarah's torment. Sarah could feel the collective gaze of the room weighing heavily upon her. The main courses arrived. Sarah carefully carried the 3 plates to the table, each bearing the restaurant's signature dish, a perfectly cooked beef tenderloin accompanied by seasonal vegetables. She moved to place the first plate in front of Yamamoto, her movements practiced and precise. But at that precise moment, one of the junior executives, caught up in trying to agree with some pronouncement of his boss, gestured emphatically while speaking. His hand struck the edge of the table with just enough force to make it wobble slightly. It was the most minuscule of movements, but it was enough. A single drop of water from the pitcher in Sarah's hand escaped and plummeted through the air, landing squarely on the sleeve of Takashi Yamamoto's immaculate suit jacket. Time seemed to stop. Yamamoto froze, his fork poised halfway to his mouth. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered it back to the table. He stared down at the tiny dark spot marring his sleeve, a spot so insignificant that most people wouldn't even notice it. But to him, it was an unforgivable transgression, as if a gaping stain had suddenly appeared. "I am so sorry, sir," Sarah said immediately, reaching for a clean linen napkin. "Please, allow me." Yamamoto raised one hand, halting her mid-sentence. He didn't look at her. He remained fixated on the offending spot on his sleeve, his jaw clenched tight. Then, still refusing to acknowledge Sarah's presence, confident that she was nothing more than an ignorant English server incapable of comprehending anything beyond her native tongue, Takashi Yamamoto turned to his two associates and launched into a rapid-fire tirade in Japanese. What he said was utterly devastating. The Japanese words flowed from Yamamoto's mouth like venom, smooth and casually cruel. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. The contempt in his voice was more than sufficient. If translated into English, his words would have sounded something like this. "Look at this clumsy girl. They hire these people based on their looks and call it service. She probably has the intelligence of a child. All she's good for is standing there looking pretty, completely useless." His two executives immediately erupted in nervous, eager to please laughter, performing for their boss, demonstrating their unwavering loyalty. They cast glances of pity and disdain at Sarah, secure in their secret language, certain that she had no inkling of the scathing remarks being directed at her. But they were profoundly mistaken. Sarah understood every single word. Every hateful syllable resonated in her mind with perfect clarity. The complex formal Japanese structure, the carefully chosen words designed to demean her, the casual cruelty of a powerful man who considered himself untouchable. She understood not just the literal meaning of the words, but the underlying disrespect behind them, the way he had reduced her to nothing more than an inanimate object, devoid of thoughts or feelings. For a long moment, Sarah simply stood there, the water pitcher still clutched in her hand. To the casual observer, Mr. Peterson hovering anxiously nearby, Victoria watching with undisguised malice from across the room, the other diners trying to discreetly observe the unfolding drama. It merely appeared as if a waitress was patiently standing by while customers conversed in a foreign language. But inside Sarah, something was cracking, or perhaps something was finally breaking free. She thought of every instance she had been overlooked, treated as if she were invisible. Every condescending remark from Victoria. Every time she had been forced to smile and nod while being treated as less than human. Every grueling shift where her aching feet and exhausted mind were simply the price she paid to pursue her dreams. She thought of the year she had spent in Tokyo, living with the Tanaka family, who had embraced her like a daughter, teaching her not only the language but also the culture, the respect, the profound appreciation for courtesy and dignity that permeated every interaction. She had fallen deeply in love with Japan, with its exquisite beauty and profound depth. And here was this man, desecrating her beloved language, transforming it into a weapon of cruelty. The professional smile vanished from Sarah's face. Her spine straightened imperceptibly. It was a subtle shift, but it transformed her entire demeanor. She was no longer a deferential server. She was a woman who had reached her breaking point. She carefully placed the water pitcher on the side table. The two executives were still chuckling, basking in the glow of their boss's joke. Yamamoto was theatrically examining his sleeve with exaggerated disgust, prolonging the moment. Then Sarah spoke, and she spoke in flawless, impeccable Japanese. Her accent was Tokyo standard, the kind one might hear from a distinguished university professor or a polished news broadcaster. Every word was meticulously chosen, grammatically perfect, delivered with a calm, unwavering confidence that cut through the room like the clear ringing of a bell. In English, her words translated to this: Sir, your assumption that my profession reflects my intelligence is as flawed as your understanding of basic human respect. Perhaps someone of your business success should have learned by now that wisdom and worth are not determined by the job someone does, but by the character they show. Clearly, that is a lesson you have failed to learn. She paused, allowing her words to sink in, then continued. And if we are discussing competence, I should point out that you used the wrong honorific level when addressing your colleagues earlier. For business associates of equal standing, the respectful form would be more appropriate. But then, perhaps accuracy is less important to you than the sound of your own voice. The effect was immediate and absolute. Takashi Yamamoto's face drained of all color. His mouth actually gaped open, his eyes widening with undisguised shock. For the first time all evening, perhaps for the first time in years, he was rendered speechless. This was a man who commanded boardrooms filled with powerful executives. A man who had built a business empire through sheer force of will. A man accustomed to controlling every situation he entered. And a mere waitress had just intellectually disarmed him in his own language. The two junior executives looked as if they had seen a ghost. Their faces alternated between pale and flushed, their minds struggling to process the surreal scene unfolding before them. They had laughed at her. They had been complicit in mocking her, and she had understood every word. From across the dining room, Victoria's wine glass slipped from her grasp, only to be caught at the last second, inches from disaster. Her mouth hung open in stunned disbelief. Mr. Peterson, who had been cautiously approaching the table to assess the situation, stopped dead in his tracks. He didn't understand Japanese, but he understood body language. He understood that something monumental had just transpired, that the power dynamics had been irrevocably altered in a way he couldn't begin to comprehend. Other diners at nearby tables had ceased eating, sensing the palpable tension, watching this extraordinary moment unfold with rapt attention. The silence hung heavy and thick in the air. Sarah stood tall, her head held high, her gaze steady and unwavering. She had said what needed to be said. She had defended her dignity in the very language the man had used to try and strip it away. Yamamoto's shock was slowly giving way to something else. The color was returning to his face, but it was no longer the pallid coldness from before. A flush was creeping up his neck, a mixture of embarrassment and something that resembled respect. He opened his mouth, hesitated, then opened it again. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, uncertain. He spoke in Japanese, the language of their confrontation. "Who are you?" he asked. It was the same question in any language, but this time it wasn't dismissive. It was genuine. He was truly asking, who is this person who has just shattered my assumptions about the world? Sarah met Takashi Yamamoto's gaze without flinching. She responded in the same flawless Japanese, her voice calm and measured. "My name is Sarah Williams. I am your server this evening." The simplicity of her answer was powerful. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't backing down. She was stating a fact, claiming her identity, refusing to allow him to define her by his preconceived notions. Yamamoto leaned back in his chair, studying her with completely new eyes. The arrogance had vanished, replaced by an intense curiosity. "That is not what I asked," he said, still in Japanese. "Where did you learn to speak like this?" Sarah took a steadying breath before answering. "I spent a year in Tokyo on a full academic scholarship, studying at Waseda University. I lived with a host family in Setagaya. My research focused on the sociolinguistics of honorific speech patterns in modern Japanese society." She watched his face as she spoke. Waseda University was one of Japan's most prestigious institutions. The detail about honorifics was pointed. She was subtly reminding him that she had noticed his linguistic blunder, that she wasn't just fluent, she was deeply versed in the intricacies of his language. Yamamoto's expression shifted again. There was something in his eyes now that looked almost like pain. Shame, perhaps, or the uncomfortable recognition of his own cruelty being reflected back at him. One of his executives, the younger one, cleared his throat and attempted to smooth things over, speaking in Japanese. "Sir, perhaps we should just continue with the—" "Be quiet," Yamamoto snapped, cutting him off. Then, He said something that caused the young man's face to turn beet red with humiliation. You laugh like a fool at my joke. You are just as guilty of disrespect as I am. Perhaps more so because you should have known better. The executive shrank back in his seat, thoroughly chastised. The other associate stared down at his plate, fervently wishing he could disappear. Mr. Peterson, unable to endure the mounting tension any longer, hurried over. Is everything all right, Miss Williams? If there's a problem. Everything is fine, Mr. Peterson, Sarah said quietly, switching back to English. We were just discussing the menu, but Peterson could see that it was anything but fine. The entire atmosphere had transformed. He looked back and forth between Sarah and Yamamoto, utterly bewildered. Perhaps I should assign another server. No, Yamamoto said sharply in English, his accent still heavy. She stays. Peterson backed away, confused and frightened, leaving them in their strange standoff. Yamamoto continued to study Sarah, and she could see his mind worrying, calculating. He was a businessman above all else. He recognized value when he saw it, even when it came in an unexpected package. He gestured to the empty chair at the table. Sit down, he said in English. Sarah shook her head. I'm working, sir. I can't. I am making it a business meeting, he interrupted. Sit, please. That last word, please, seemed to cost him something. It wasn't a word he used often. Sarah hesitated. This was a blatant violation of restaurant policy. But something in his tone had shifted. The coldness was still present, but there was also genuine interest, and perhaps the glimmer of something akin to respect. She sat down, her back straight, her hands folded demurely in her lap. Across the dining room, she could feel Victoria's furious stare burning into her back. Yamamoto switched back to Japanese, speaking more deliberately now with a newfound respect. My company is expanding in Europe. We are buying properties, developing them, working with local businesses. It is complicated work. Cultural differences cause problems. Misunderstandings cost money and time. He paused, carefully choosing his words. I have translators. I have many translators, but they translate words only. They do not translate meaning. They do not understand the space between what people say and what they actually mean. Sarah listened intently, beginning to grasp the direction of his thoughts. I need someone who can do more than translate, Yamamoto continued. Someone who understands culture deeply. Someone who can tell me when a British business partner says, that's interesting, but really means absolutely not. Someone who can help my Japanese team understand why their direct communication style offends Europeans. Someone who can bridge the gap. He looked directly at her. Someone like you. Then, he switched to English, perhaps to eliminate any ambiguity. I am offering you a position with my company. You would work with my international development team. 6 months in London, then 6 months in Tokyo. The salary would be £60,000 per year, plus housing assistance. Sarah felt the air rush from her lungs. It was more money than she had ever imagined earning, especially fresh out of university. It was freedom from debt, freedom from the daily struggle, freedom from counting every penny. It was the kind of opportunity people only dreamed about, but it was being offered by the very man who, just moments ago, had dismissed her as useless and stupid. Why? She asked simply in Japanese. Why would you offer this to me after what you said? For the first time, Yamamoto appeared genuinely uncomfortable. He glanced down at his hands, then back at her. When he spoke, his voice was softer, less assured. Because you did something no one in my company does. You told me the truth. You showed me my mistake. Everyone who works for me is afraid. They tell me what I want to hear. They laugh at my jokes even when they are not funny. They never challenge me. He gestured to his 2 junior executives. I do not want that anymore. 2 of his associates were fixated on their plates, avoiding eye contact. Pathetic, he thought. Look at them. They'd scurry back to the office and regale everyone with tales of his brilliance, conveniently omitting any mention of his boorish behavior, his near meltdown. This, he mused, was how empires crumbled, when sycophants shielded the emperor from reality, afraid to utter a dissenting word. He leaned forward ever so slightly, his gaze piercing. You are not afraid of me. A statement, not a question. That is rare. That is valuable. More valuable than 100 yes-men. Sarah sat there, in that ridiculously opulent restaurant, the crystal chandelier glinting in her eyes. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Her mind, a whirlwind of possibilities and doubts, spun like a top, a staggering sum, a genuine career, not just another dead-end job, a chance to finally utilize all the knowledge she'd painstakingly acquired, all the skills she'd relentlessly honed. But at what cost? Could she stomach working for a man who held her, and seemingly all women, in such blatant contempt? I need time to think about this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, speaking in clear, unaccented English. Yamamoto nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. There was something akin to respect flickering in his eyes. He had anticipated a desperate, immediate acceptance, and her hesitation, her audacity to actually consider the offer, seemed to impress him even more. He reached inside his impeccably tailored jacket and extracted a business card, sleek, minimalist, expensive. He scribbled something on the back with a silver pen. Come to my office tomorrow morning at 9. This is the address. We will discuss the details. He paused, a glint in his eye. And Miss Williams, do not be late. With that pronouncement, he stood abruptly, a signal for his entourage to spring into action. His 2 associates, like well-trained puppets, scrambled to their feet, visibly relieved to escape the oppressive atmosphere. Yamamoto peeled off several large bills from a thick wad and placed them on the table, a sum far exceeding the cost of the meal and leaving a ridiculously generous tip. He cast one last, lingering look at Sarah, and she thought she detected the faintest ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Then he was gone, a whirlwind of power and arrogance, striding out of the restaurant, his obedient retinue trailing in his wake. Sarah remained seated for a moment longer, the heavy weight of the business card a tangible presence in her hand. The opulent dining room, once a cacophony of hushed conversations, was now utterly silent. Every eye was fixed on her. Mr. Peterson, the restaurant manager, a man whose face usually radiated a forced, obsequious smile, rushed over, his complexion now a mottled purple with a mixture of confusion and barely suppressed rage. Williams, what on earth was that about? You sat at a customer's table. You know what, Mr. Peterson? I quit, Sarah said, the words surprisingly calm, surprisingly firm, even as they tumbled out of her mouth before she'd fully committed to them. But once spoken, they felt irrevocably, undeniably right. I'm giving you my notice, effective immediately, Peterson sputtered, his face turning an even deeper shade of purple. You can't just... But Sarah was already walking away, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor, heading towards the cramped, dimly lit staff room to gather her belongings. Behind her, she could hear Victoria's voice, laced with bitterness and venom. She probably offered him something. That's what happened. That's the only way someone like her could. Sarah didn't bother to turn around. She didn't need to. Let Victoria wallow in her petty jealousies. None of it mattered anymore. She was free. That night, sleep eluded Sarah. She lay in her tiny, sparsely furnished flat, staring up at the cracked and peeling ceiling, the Yamamoto's business card lying on her nightstand, a silent, weighty invitation. Her mind was a battlefield, torn between ambition and principle. Could she actually work for him? For a man who had uttered such vile, dehumanizing things about her and women in general? Would accepting his offer tacitly condone his behavior? Would she be betraying her own values, selling her soul for a lucrative paycheck? But another voice, a more pragmatic, perhaps even a more desperate voice, argued back. The money wasn't just for her. It would provide much-needed relief for her mom, who had tirelessly worked 2 backbreaking jobs for years to ensure Sarah could pursue her education. It would mean Sarah could finally escape the suffocating weight of her student loans, the constant worry that gnawed at her. It would mean financial security, unprecedented opportunities, a real, tangible future. And maybe, just maybe, working for Yamamoto wouldn't be a complete and utter sellout. Maybe it could be something else entirely. Maybe she could be a lone voice of honesty and integrity in his rarefied, insulated world of yes-men. Maybe she could challenge his prejudices, help him see people differently, treat them with the respect they deserved. Maybe, just maybe, she could actually make a real difference. She thought back to her year in Tokyo, the kindness and generosity she'd experienced with the Tanaka family, the deep appreciation she developed for the culture, the language, the nuanced way of thinking. This job, despite its inherent risks, would allow her to bridge 2 worlds she cared about deeply, to foster understanding and connection. As dawn broke over the London skyline, casting a pale, ethereal glow over the city, Sarah made her decision. She showered, meticulously dressed in the most professional outfit she owned, a simple, elegant navy dress and matching blazer she'd painstakingly saved up for and bought secondhand, and set off across the city, the rising sun warming her face. The Yamamoto Property Group headquarters was a colossal tower of steel and glass that dominated the Canary Wharf skyline. Impressive and intimidating. Sarah walked through the gleaming, cavernous lobby, feeling the weight of unseen eyes upon her, gave her name to the impeccably dressed receptionist, and was promptly whisked up to the top floor in a high-speed elevator that ascended so quickly her ears popped. Yamamoto's office was even more breathtaking than she had imagined, an enormous, sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the Thames and the cityscape beyond. He was standing by the window, his back to her, a solitary figure silhouetted against the dawn. He didn't turn around immediately, allowing the tension to build. You came, he said, the words spoken in fluent Japanese. I did, Sarah replied, responding in the same language, her voice steady, betraying none of the anxiety she felt. But I have conditions. Now he turned, slowly, deliberately, one eyebrow arched in a silent question. Conditions? Sarah stood tall, drawing upon every reserve of courage she possessed, channeling the quiet strength she'd always known she had. First, I will never accept being spoken to disrespectfully. Not in English, not in Japanese, not in any language. I am happy to receive professional feedback, constructive criticism, but I will not tolerate being belittled or demeaned. Yamamoto's face remained impassive, unreadable. She couldn't discern whether she was making progress or simply digging her own grave. She continued, pressing on. Second, I am finishing my degree. I need some flexibility in my schedule for the next few months to complete my coursework. My work for you will not suffer, I assure you, but my education is important to me. And third, she said, pausing for emphasis, the housing assistance you mentioned, I would like part of it to be used differently. I want you to create a scholarship fund for language students at London University, students who aspire to study abroad but lack the financial resources to do so. Call it the Yamamoto Cultural Exchange Scholarship. She held her breath, bracing herself for his reaction. She had asked for the seemingly impossible, demanding respect from a man known for his ruthlessness and audacity, and asking him to divert company funds towards a philanthropic cause that had no direct business value whatsoever. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy, feeling like an eternity. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, Takashi Yamamoto began to smile. It was a real smile, not the cold, calculating smirk from the previous night, but something genuine, something almost warm. Miss Williams, he said, switching back to English. You are even more formidable than I initially thought. He walked over to his expansive desk and retrieved a thick folder. I accept your conditions. All of them. The scholarship is actually a rather brilliant idea. Excellent publicity for the company, I must admit. He pushed the folder across the polished surface towards her. This is your contract. Read it carefully. Take it to a lawyer if you wish. If you are satisfied, sign it and you can start on Monday. Sarah reached out with trembling hands and took the folder. She had done it. She had walked into the lion's den, armed with nothing but her wit and her unwavering sense of self-worth, and not only survived but emerged victorious, securing exactly what she wanted. As she turned to leave, Yamamoto spoke again, this time in careful, respectful Japanese. Miss Williams, thank you for last night. Thank you for showing me what I had become. I needed that wake-up call. Sarah looked back at him and saw something she hadn't expected to see in this powerful, imposing man, humility. We all need reminders sometimes, she said gently, her voice filled with compassion, about what really matters, about treating people with dignity. 3 years later, Sarah wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. She had played a pivotal role in helping Yamamoto Property Group successfully expand its operations across Europe, skillfully navigating cultural differences and preventing countless misunderstandings that could have cost the company dearly. She had earned the respect of everyone within the organization, not because of her impressive title, but because of her wisdom, her unwavering integrity, and her genuine commitment to fostering positive relationships. And the Yamamoto Cultural Exchange Scholarship? It had already sent 20 deserving students abroad to study languages and cultures, broadening their horizons and enriching their lives in ways they had never thought possible. 20 young people who, like Sarah, possessed the passion, the intelligence, and the drive to succeed, but lacked the financial means to realize their dreams. 20 futures irrevocably changed for the better. As for Yamamoto himself, he was still a demanding and uncompromising leader, but he was also different. More thoughtful, more aware of the impact of his words and actions on those around him. He had learned that true strength wasn't about making others feel small and insignificant. It was about empowering them, lifting them up, and fostering an environment where everyone could thrive. Sarah's story is a potent reminder of something profoundly important. Your worth is not defined by your job title, your uniform, or the opinions of others. Your worth stems from the intrinsic qualities that reside within you, your knowledge, your dignity, your empathy, and your courage to speak truth to power, even when it's terrifying. Sometimes, the people who appear to be the most powerful are actually the most fragile, their strength a facade masking deep-seated insecurities. And sometimes, the people who seem powerless possess a quiet resilience, a hidden strength that can ultimately change the course of everything. One moment of courage, one perfectly timed response, one unwavering act of defiance, can open doors you never imagined possible and propel you towards a future filled with purpose and fulfillment. Sarah didn't just defend herself that night at the royal table. She transformed the trajectory of her entire life. She proved that true power doesn't derive from wealth or status. It emanates from knowing your own value and refusing to allow anyone to diminish it. And that's a lesson worth remembering. No matter what language you speak, no matter where you come from, no matter what challenges you face. If this story resonated with you, remember, you are worthy of respect. Your dreams are valid. Your voice matters. Never, ever let anyone convince you otherwise.